You'd think waking up in a hospital after a truck accident would be the worst part of my week. No. Turns out, the real nightmare started when the nurse called my wife. And another man picked up. I survived the crash. But my marriage? Not so lucky. I spent most of my life on the road. Trucking isn't just a job. It's a lifestyle, one that turns bad diner coffee and restless motel nights into routine. I've driven through ice storms, dodged lunatic drivers, and spent more hours behind the wheel than some people spend with their families. But no amount of experience prepares you for the moment when a patch of black ice decides to remind you that physics is undefeated. 1 second, I was gripping the wheel, white-knuckled, praying my 18-wheeler wouldn't slide off the road. The next, I was waking up to bright lights, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the dull, distant realization that something inside me felt wrong. My body ached in ways I didn't think were possible. My ribs screamed. My head felt like it had been used for batting practice. And my left leg? Well, let's just say it was making some executive decisions about my walking ability. A nurse was hovering over me, speaking in that soft, cautious tone people use when they're not sure if you're about to scream or pass out. She told me I'd been in a bad accident. The semi was totaled. A miracle I even made it out alive. Standard hospital speech. Then she asked if I wanted her to call my wife. Emma, my emergency contact. The person I had trusted with my life, my home, my everything. Of course I nodded. Of course I wanted my wife to know I was alive. So the nurse dialed, put the phone on speaker, and we waited. The first ring, nothing. The second, still nothing. By the third, I started to feel uneasy. Emma always kept her phone on. Always. Even if she was asleep, she'd pick up for me. That was our rule. No matter the hour, if I was on the road and called, she'd answer. Except tonight, she didn't. Then on the fourth ring, the call connected. Hello. A man's voice. Not a sleepy, confused, who is this voice? No. This voice was calm. Collected. Like he was used to answering this phone. My wife's phone. I stopped breathing. The nurse shifted uncomfortably, glancing between me and the screen. She must have assumed she dialed the wrong number, so she asked, "Is this Emma's phone?" A pause. A hesitation. Then click. The line went dead. That silence did something to me. I've been in a lot of bad situations in my life. Near misses on the highway, shady truck stops, moments where I truly thought I wasn't going to make it. But nothing made my stomach drop like that moment. The nurse, bless her heart, looked like she wanted to crawl out of the room. I could tell she was debating whether or not to ask if everything was okay. But I already knew the answer. Emma wasn't alone. I was lying in a hospital bed, broken and bruised, while some other man was comfortable enough to pick up her phone in the middle of the night. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she left her phone somewhere. Maybe a friend grabbed it. No, I wasn't an idiot. I didn't have proof yet. But in that moment, I knew. I survived the crash. But my marriage? That wreck had been happening for a long time. I was just too blind to see it. Lying in that hospital bed, I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe my wife lost her phone. Maybe a coworker borrowed it. Maybe I had hit my head harder than I thought, and I was imagining things. Yeah, and maybe pigs were lining up for commercial flights. Deep down, I knew. The kind of knowing that doesn't need proof, doesn't need explanations. It just sits in your gut like a swallowed brick. But knowing something and accepting it are two different beasts, and I wasn't ready to let this beast sink its teeth in just yet. I told the nurse not to call again. I needed time to think, time to figure out if I was going to confront this head-on or let myself live in denial a little longer. She gave me that look, the one people give when they know they just witnessed the exact moment someone's life derailed. Then she nodded and left me alone with my thoughts. Bad idea. My brain started replaying moments I had ignored. Emma's late nights at work, the sudden girls' trips she never used to take, the way her phone was suddenly always face down on the counter. The time I came home early from a run, and she nearly jumped out of her skin when I walked through the door. She had laughed it off, said I startled her. That was 6 months ago. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now, it felt like a breadcrumb leading me straight to the truth. The truth. That's what I needed. And I wasn't going to get it by lying in a hospital bed feeling sorry for myself. As soon as the doctor gave me clearance, I checked myself out. The nurses tried to stop me, saying I needed more rest, that my leg wasn't fully healed, that I had a concussion. I didn't care. Pain was temporary. Lies? They fester. The taxi ride home felt longer than the hours I'd spent trapped in my wrecked truck waiting for paramedics. The closer I got to my house, the heavier the air felt. I expected to walk into my own home and feel like a stranger. What I didn't expect was to feel like an intruder. I stepped onto my porch, fished my keys out of my pocket, and hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me already knew what was waiting for me on the other side. I took a breath, turned the key, and pushed the door open. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Cologne. Not mine. Something sharp, expensive. Something I'd never worn in my life. The second thing I noticed was the sound. Footsteps. Not from the kitchen. Not from the hallway. From our bedroom. My legs still hurt from the accident, but I didn't feel it anymore. I moved forward, slow and silent, like a man walking toward his own execution. The door to our bedroom was slightly open. Not wide, just enough for me to see movement. And then I heard it. Emma's voice. Soft. Murmuring. Playful. I pushed the door open, and there she was, half-dressed, her hair still messy from the sheets, standing way too close to a man who wasn't me. The moment stretched out, slow and thick, like the air itself had turned to tar. She saw me. Froze. The man? He turned, looked me dead in the eyes, and smiled. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was something planned, something practiced, something routine. And suddenly, all the pain from my accident felt like nothing compared to what I felt standing in that doorway. I always thought if I ever caught my wife cheating, I'd feel blind rage. That white-hot, punch-a-hole-in-the-wall, flip-the-table kind of anger. But standing there in our bedroom doorway, watching my half-dressed wife and some stranger stare at me like I was the intruder in my own house, I didn't feel rage. I felt cold. The kind of cold that creeps into your bones and settles there like it was always meant to. The kind of cold that makes every word you say sharper, every action more deliberate, every breath feel like you're inhaling broken glass. Emma's face was frozen in shock, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to speak, but hadn't yet figured out what words could possibly fix this. There were none. The man, the absolute idiot, actually had the audacity to smile at me, like I was some poor sap walking in on the end of something instead of the middle of it. My body moved before my brain did. I wasn't thinking. I was reacting. The duffel bag I was holding, packed with the few belongings the hospital let me leave with, flew from my hand and hit the dresser with a loud thud, knocking over a framed wedding photo. How poetic. The sound snapped them both out of their shock. Emma yelped, stumbling backward, clutching the bedsheet to her chest like it could somehow shield her from what was coming next. The man stepped forward slightly, like he thought he was about to play peacekeeper. Wrong move. I pointed a finger at him, my voice low, steady, deadly. You move one more inch, and I swear I'll make sure you regret it. He stopped. Good. He had some survival instincts, at least. Emma finally found her voice, and of course, the first thing out of her mouth wasn't an apology, wasn't an attempt to explain. It was a lie. It's not what it looks like. Oh, that line. That classic, overused, absolutely useless line. I let out a laugh, sharp, humorless, full of venom. Oh, really? I gestured around the room. So, what exactly am I looking at, Emma? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife just spent the night with someone who isn't me while I was in a hospital recovering from a near-fatal accident. Her eyes widened. Wait, you were in the hospital? I blinked. Are you serious? And that's when it hit me. She hadn't even noticed I was gone. Hadn't wondered why I didn't call. Hadn't cared enough to check her messages. I could have died in that crash, and she would have only found out when the life insurance company called to cut her a check. My stomach twisted, not with sadness, not with heartbreak, but with something darker. Wow. That's all I said. Just wow. Because what else was there to say? Emma shook her head, stepping forward like she could somehow reach me through the growing chasm between us. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Like this? Like this? I ran a hand over my face, exhaling sharply, trying to stop myself from breaking something. How exactly did you want me to find out, Emma? A note? A text? Maybe after I caught you for the 100th time, because let's be real, this wasn't the first, was it? Silence. Guilt flickered across her face for the briefest second before she smothered it with something uglier. Defensiveness. You were never home. Ah, there it was. The excuse. The shifting of blame. The attempt to make me the bad guy. You were always on the road. Always working. What did you expect me to do? Just sit here waiting for you. I laughed again, louder this time, shaking my head. Oh, I don't know. Maybe not cheat on your husband? Maybe pick up the phone when he's lying in a hospital bed? Maybe have a shred of decency? I turned to the guy, who had been standing there, awkwardly silent, clearly realizing he had walked into a mess he wasn't prepared for. And you, I said, my voice ice cold. Do you even know who I am? He swallowed. Emma said you two were separated. I'll let that sit for a second. Then I looked back at Emma, who couldn't even meet my gaze. Liar, liar, liar. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We're about to be, but not in the way you think. Then I turned, walked out of the room, and grabbed my phone. Emma ran after me, panic creeping into her voice. Wait, what are you doing? I didn't answer. I pulled up my call log and hit redial on the last number. The nurse. The one who had called her phone and heard another man answer. The moment she picked up, I spoke clearly, loudly, making sure Emma heard every word. Hey, yeah, it's me. You remember that call last night? The one where a strange man answered my wife's phone. Emma gasped. I kept talking. Yeah, I'm going to need you to document that for my divorce lawyer. Emma screamed. The man? He grabbed his clothes and ran. I just smiled, still holding the phone to my ear, because this was just the beginning of her downfall. I always thought the worst part of betrayal would be the heartbreak, the sadness, the gut-wrenching agony of losing someone you love. Turns out, I was wrong. The worst part? Realizing they were never who you thought they were. Emma wasn't sobbing because she was sorry. She wasn't breaking down because she loved me and regretted her choices. No, she was panicking because she realized she had lost control. She knew I had her cornered. And like any coward, she was about to make it as messy as possible on her way down. The moment I hung up with the nurse, she lunged for my phone. You're not calling a lawyer. We can fix this. Her voice was shrill, desperate. I didn't even flinch. I held my phone high, my other hand on her shoulder, stopping her in her tracks. Emma, I said, calm as ever. You don't get to fix something you burned to the ground. Her face twisted into something ugly, rage, frustration, the realization that her usual tricks weren't working. You don't get to just throw me away, she shrieked. Oh, that's rich. I was throwing her away? After she had another man in my house, in my bed, answering her phone like he was paying the mortgage? I let out a slow, measured breath. I wasn't going to yell. Yelling meant you were letting them get to you. And I refused to give her the satisfaction. You made your choice, I said, voice low, steady. Now you get to live with it. I turned to leave, but she wasn't done. Of course, she wasn't. She was like a wounded animal, backed into a corner, ready to lash out in whatever way she could. And that's when she went for the nuclear option. You were never here, she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. You were always on the road, always working, always choosing your stupid truck over me. What did you expect me to do? Just sit around like a pathetic housewife waiting for you to come home? Oh, there it was. The real truth. I turned back slowly, staring at her like she was some stranger who had wandered into my house and started spewing nonsense. Because, honestly, that's what she was. You think I wanted to be gone all the time? I asked, my voice eerily calm. You think I enjoyed missing birthdays, anniversaries, weekends together? I was busting my A to make sure we had a house, food, security. I was out there killing myself on the road, so you could live comfortably. She scoffed, crossing her arms. Comfortably? Oh yeah, living alone in this house, going to bed by myself, eating dinner alone. That was real comfortable, wasn't it? I stared at her for a long moment, then did something that made her stop breathing for a second. I laughed. Not a happy laugh, not even a bitter one. A dark, cold chuckle that sent a shiver up her spine for once. You think you were alone in this house? I shook my head, still chuckling. Emma, I hate to break it to you, but you weren't alone. I gestured toward the bedroom. He was here, wasn't he? Or was it just him? Tell me, Emma, how many nights were you really sleeping alone while I was out there risking my life on the highway? Her face drained of color. Ah, there it is. This wasn't just a one-time slip-up. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a pattern, a habit, a full-fledged affair that had been going on for God knows how long. I took another step forward, watching as she actually shrank back. How many? I repeated, softer this time, more deadly. She bit her lip, eyes darting around like she was trying to find an escape route. But there wasn't one. How many? Emma. She swallowed hard, then whispered 3. For the first time since I walked into that house, I felt genuinely stunned. Not because I didn't expect it, not because I was shocked that she had been unfaithful, but because of how easily she admitted it. Like 3 different men was just a minor inconvenience, a footnote in her excuses. I shook my head, letting out another low laugh. Wow, you didn't even try to hide it, did you? Her lips trembled. I didn't. You didn't what? I snapped, finally letting my voice rise. You didn't mean to get caught? You didn't mean for me to come home and ruin your perfect little game? She sobbed, her hands covering her face, shaking her head like she could just rewind time and undo everything. I needed to feel wanted. You were never here, and I held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. You know what the worst part of all this is? I used to feel guilty about being away. I used to tell myself, she must be lonely. She must be struggling with me gone all the time. I used to believe you deserve better. I let out a slow breath. Turns out, you never deserved me at all. That broke her. She collapsed onto the couch, full-on wailing, like her life was ending right in front of her. Maybe it was. At least, the life she had with me was. But I wasn't done. I pulled my phone back out, opened my contacts, and started typing. She sniffled. What are you doing? I didn't look up. Making sure everyone knows exactly who you are. She gasped. No, you can't. Please don't. Ich glänzte hier. Un pot hill. You weren't alone, right? Well, neither are you now. Time for your parents, your friends, our neighbors. Hell, even your coworkers, to find out who they've really been dealing with. She screamed like I was physically hurting her. But I didn't stop, because Emma had made her choices. And now, I was making mine. There are 2 kinds of cheaters. The ones who cheat because they think they'll never get caught, and the ones who cheat because they think even if they do get caught, they'll talk their way out of it. Emma? She was the latter. She thought I'd be too heartbroken to expose her. She thought she could sob, manipulate, gaslight, and guilt-trip her way back into control. She thought she could make me the villain, because, let's be real, that's what people like her do. She thought wrong. The moment I hit send, she lunged for my phone, screeching like a banshee, but I was faster. I stepped back, watching her trip over herself in a desperate attempt to undo what I had just done. But there was no undoing it. The messages were out. Group chats, family chats, friends, neighbors. Hey everyone, just letting you know Emma has been cheating on me for months. 3 different guys, all while I was working 60-hour weeks to keep this house afloat. Thought you should all know the kind of person she really is. That was the message. Short, cold, final. Emma collapsed onto the floor, clutching her head like she could physically hold her life together if she just squeezed hard enough. No, 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 she shrieked, frantically unlocking her phone. She started typing, no doubt trying to control the narrative, trying to send out her own sob story before the truth spread too far. But I wasn't done. I walked past her, grabbed my laptop, sat down at the kitchen table, and pulled up my email. If she thought I was only exposing her to our personal circle, she was in for a nasty surprise. I drafted 2 emails. The first one, to her parents. I wanted to tell you this in person, but I won't be able to look you in the eye after what your daughter has done. Emma has been cheating on me for months, 3 different men, in our house, in our bed, all while I was working on the road. I know you raised her better than this, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. I won't be speaking to her again after today. Take care. The second email? To her boss. Hello, I wanted to give you a heads up that Emma has been using her overtime hours as an excuse to cheat on me with multiple men. I don't know if she's been using work time for these affairs, but I thought you might want to check her attendance records. I'd hate for your company to be funding her extracurricular activities. I hit send on both. Emma's wail from across the room told me she just saw the first wave of reactions hit her phone. The message threads? Exploding. Her mom, tell me this isn't true. Her best friend, Emma, is this real? She turned on me, eyes wild with desperation. You're ruining me, she screamed. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. You ruined yourself, I said, watching her like a man watching a house he used to live in burn to the ground. She started pacing, hands yanking at her hair, her breaths coming fast and panicked. I can fix this. I can explain. Her phone rang. She froze. The screen lit up. Her dad. I've met that man. He was old school. Military. The kind of guy who believed in loyalty, discipline, and integrity. And judging by the look on Emma's face, she knew she was about to have the worst conversation of her life. She didn't pick up. She just stood there, staring at the screen like it was a bomb about to go off. And then, her phone started blowing up. Call after call. Message after message. The walls were closing in. I stood up, stretched, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. Where are you going? She stammered. I turned, looked her dead in the eye, and said home. She blinked. But this is... Not anymore. I cut her off. You can stay here while you pack your things. I'll be back in 2 hours. If you're still here when I return, I'm calling the cops to have you removed. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. You can't just throw me out. I smirked. You threw us out first. I'm just returning the favor. And with that, I walked out, leaving Emma in the ruins of her own destruction. But this wasn't the end, because there was one last move to make, and I was going to make sure it was the one that finished her for good. You ever walk away from a burning wreck and feel nothing? No guilt, no regret, no second thoughts. Just the pure, unshackled freedom of knowing you'll never have to look at that disaster again. That was me walking out of my house that day. 2 hours. That's how long I gave Emma to pack her things and leave. Did she? Nope. Because people like her never think the rules apply to them. They think they can weasel their way back, manipulate their way into a second chance, claw their way out of the hole they dug for themselves. She was wrong. When I got back, she was still there, a mess. Makeup smeared, hair wild, phone still buzzing with unanswered calls from her family and friends who had finally seen her for what she really was. I need more time, she sobbed, standing in the living room, surrounded by half-packed bags. Please, you can't just... I pulled out my phone. She froze. You have exactly 5 seconds to start walking out that door, or I'm calling the cops, I said, my voice steady calm, deadly serious. Her mouth opened, probably to spew some last-minute excuse, maybe one final attempt at guilt-tripping me. But when I pressed my finger over the call button, her body reacted before her brain could. She grabbed her bags, stumbling toward the door, gasping like she was physically choking on her own downfall. I watched as she dragged herself outside, looking over her shoulder like I was going to change my mind. I didn't. The moment she crossed the threshold, I slammed the door behind her, locked it, and for the first time in months, breathed, rebuilding from the ruins. The next few weeks? Glorious. Emma tried to run damage control, but the damage was too big, and she was too small. Her parents cut her off. Her friends stopped responding. And her boss? Well, turns out she had been spending her work hours with her affair partners, and HR wasn't thrilled about that. She lost her job within a week. Meanwhile, me? I healed. Physically, emotionally, financially. I won the divorce. Since she had committed adultery, she got nothing. No house. No alimony. No settlement. I sold the house. Took the money. Bought a place miles away from the wreckage of my old life. And the best part? I felt good. Really good. The hospital injuries? Getting fussed. Turns out getting rid of dead weight does wonders for recovery. My ribs stopped aching. My leg regained its strength. The migraines? Gone. The weight of carrying a marriage alone? Lifted. I went back to work. This time for me. I took the jobs I wanted. I drove the routes I liked. I saved for myself, not for someone waiting at home to betray me. And Emma? I heard through the grapevine that she was living in a cheap apartment, bouncing between jobs, burning bridges faster than she could rebuild them. Am I sorry? Not even a little. Because at the end of the day, she lost everything. And me? I survived the crash. And I walked away stronger than ever. And if you ever find yourself in my shoes, just remember, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better.